Did you know Elvis recorded his biggest selling single just after leaving the army? Or that the melody was already a 62-year-old Italian classic before he ever sang a note? What if the song's American writers only got the job because they were the only ones who showed up to the publisher's office that day? The story of It's Now or Never is more than just a hit record. It's a story about a soldier, a bet, and a sound that changed music around the world. It involves a frantic race against time, a pressing plant that couldn't keep up, and a high note that almost didn't happen. Number 21, what was the song before Elvis found it? The melody to It's Now or Never was not new in 1960. Not even close. It was composed in 1898 in Naples, Italy. The original song was called O Sole Mio, which means My Sunshine in the Neapolitan dialect. It was written by two men, a composer named Eduardo di Capua and a poet named Giovanni Capuro. The story goes that Di Capua was in Odessa, in the Russian Empire, touring with his father's orchestra. He was inspired by the sunrise over the Black Sea, but he missed the sunshine of his native Naples. He wrote the melody right there and sent it to Capuro back in Italy to write the words. Capuro's lyrics weren't a plea for a lover's kiss. They were a beautiful description of a sunny day, comparing the beauty of the sun to the beauty of his beloved's face. The song was an immediate hit in Italy. It became a standard for Italian tenors. Every great opera singer, from Enrico Caruso to Luciano Pavarotti, would eventually record it. Caruso's version in 1916 was one of the earliest smash hits of the recorded music era. It sold over 1 million copies, a staggering number for the time. The song traveled the world with Italian immigrants. It became an anthem for Italian culture, a piece of home that people carried with them. It was played in restaurants, at weddings, and in concert halls. It was so well known that many people thought it was a traditional folk song passed down for generations. But it was a composed piece of music with a clear copyright. Before Elvis, the song had already made its way into American pop culture. The actor and singer Tony Martin had a hit with it in 1949. His version was called There's No Tomorrow. The lyrics were completely different from O Sole Mio. They were written by Al Hoffman, Leo Corday, and Leon Carr. Their version was a more dramatic, romantic song about a soldier going off to war, telling his lover they must find their happiness tonight because he might not return. It was a good song, and it did well on the charts. It reached number 22 on the Billboard charts. This was the version that a young Elvis Presley, stationed in Germany with the U.S. Army, would have heard. He liked Tony Martin's record a lot. He played it over and over. He even made a private recording of himself singing it for his own enjoyment. He felt a connection to the melody. He knew that if he ever got the chance, he wanted to record his own version. But he didn't want to do There's No Tomorrow. He wanted something new, something that was his. The stage was set. An old Italian melody had crossed the ocean, become a minor American pop hit, and found its way into the hands of a soldier who was about to become the biggest star in the world again. He just needed the right words. Number 20. How did two songwriters get the job of a lifetime by chance? The job of writing the English lyrics for Elvis's new version of O Sole Mio fell to two men in New York City. Their names were Aaron Schroeder and Wally Gold. They worked for Hill and Range Music, the publishing company that controlled most of Elvis's material. The story of how they got the assignment is pure luck. When Elvis returned from the army in 1960, he was full of ideas. He told his music publisher, Freddie Bienstock, about his love for Tony Martin's There's No Tomorrow. He said he wanted to record the melody, but with brand new lyrics. He wanted something powerful and operatic, but also modern and direct. Bienstock knew this was a huge opportunity. A new single from the returning Elvis was guaranteed to be a massive event. He went back to his office in the Brill Building in New York, the famous hub of American songwriting. He called a meeting with all his staff writers. He told them the assignment new lyrics for O Sole Mio, tailored for Elvis Presley. He needed them fast. Elvis was scheduled to record in just a few weeks. The writers all went back to their little cubicles with their pianos and started working. But Schroeder and Gold had an advantage. Their office was right next to Bienstock's. They heard the assignment and immediately got to work. They weren't trying to write another sad soldier song. They wanted something urgent and passionate. They came up with the title, It's Now or Never. It was a simple, powerful phrase. The lyrics told a direct story. A man tells a woman that his love won't wait. She has to decide tonight. It's now or never. It was a perfect fit for Elvis's persona. It had the romance, but also the confidence and a little bit of the danger that made him a star. They worked on it for just a half an hour, maybe even less. They wrote the words, worked out a simple chord structure, and made a quick demo recording with Wally Gold singing. They walked next door to Freddie Bienstock's office. Everyone else was still trying to come up with ideas. Schroeder and Gold played their demo. Bienstock loved it immediately. He knew it was exactly what Elvis was looking for. He canceled the competition on the spot. He told the other writers to stop working. He had found the song. The demo was packed up and flown to Nashville, where Elvis was preparing for his first post-army recording session. Schroeder and Gold had no idea they had just written the biggest song of their careers. They were just two guys in an office who worked fast. Their speed and proximity to the boss won them the job. That simple demo, recorded in a tiny office in a matter of minutes, was about to become a global phenomenon. Number 19, why was Elvis in Germany in the first place? To understand It's Now or Never, you have to understand where Elvis was in his life. In 1958, he was the undisputed king of rock and roll. He was the biggest star in the world. He had a string of number one hits. He had starred in successful movies. He was a cultural icon. And then he got drafted. On March 24th, 1958, Elvis Presley was inducted into the U.S. Army. He became Private Presley number 53,310,761. Many thought his career was over. In the fast-moving world of pop music, 2 years was a lifetime. New stars would emerge. The public would forget him. Elvis took his duties seriously. He didn't ask for special treatment. He did his basic training at Fort Hood, Texas. Then he was assigned to the 3rd Armored Division and stationed in Friedberg, West Germany. This was a world away from Graceland and the recording studios of Memphis and Hollywood. He was a soldier. He drove a Jeep. He went on maneuvers. He lived in a barracks, at least for a while, before moving his family, including his father and grandmother, to a rented house in a nearby town called Bad Nauheim. It was during this time in Germany that his musical tastes began to broaden. He was away from the pressures of being a star. He had time to listen to music for himself. He listened to a lot of gospel. He listened to the pop singers of the day, like Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin. And he listened to opera. He was especially drawn to the powerful voices of tenors, like Mario Lanza and Enrico Caruso. He was fascinated by their vocal range and control. This was a different kind of singing from the rock and roll he was known for. It was more formal, more dramatic. He started to think about his own voice in a new way. Could he sing like that? Could he bring that kind of power and emotion to his own music? This is where Tony Martin's record of There's No Tomorrow comes in. Elvis had a copy of it in Germany. He played it constantly at his house in Bad Nauheim. He would sing along to it, trying to match the big, soaring melody. He saw it as a challenge. The song's Italian roots and operatic feel appealed to his new musical interests. He wasn't just a rock and roll shouter, he was a vocalist. He had a powerful 3-octave range, and he wanted to use it. The Army didn't end Elvis's career. It gave him a 2-year break to mature as a person and as an artist. It exposed him to new sounds and new ideas. When he came back to America in March 1960, he wasn't the same 23-year-old kid who had left. He was a 25-year-old man, a sergeant in the U.S. Army, and he had a vision for his music. That vision was bigger, more epic, and more operatic than anything he had done before. It's Now or Never was the first and most powerful statement of that new vision. Number 18, what really happened in the studio that night? The recording session for It's Now or Never took place on April 3rd, 1960. It was Elvis's second session after returning from the Army. The location was RCA's Studio B in Nashville, Tennessee. This wasn't just any studio. It was the place where the Nashville sound was being born. It was a sound that polished the rough edges of country music and added smooth strings and vocal choruses to make it appeal to a wider pop audience. The producer for the session was Chet Atkins, a legendary guitarist and record executive. But Elvis's own man, Steve Sholes, was also there, along with Elvis's publisher, Freddie Bienstock, who had brought the demo from New York. The session started late at night, as Elvis preferred. The musicians were the best in Nashville, the so-called a team. You had Scotty Moore on electric guitar, Bob Moore on bass, DJ Fontana and Buddy Harman on drums, Floyd Kramer on piano, and Hank Garland on guitar. The Jordanaires were there for the backing vocals. This was a group of professionals who could play anything. Elvis came in prepared. He played them the demo of It's Now or Never that Schroeder and Gold had made. And then he played them Tony Martin's There's No Tomorrow. He explained what he wanted. He wanted the passion of the Tony Martin version, but with the new, punchier lyrics. And he wanted it to be big. They started working on the arrangement. Floyd Kramer's piano part was crucial. He came up with a distinctive rolling rhythm that gave the song its unique feel, a sort of Latin-tinged shuffle. The band quickly fell into place. They were experts at finding the right groove, but the real challenge was Elvis's vocal. This was not a simple rock and roll song. It required a huge vocal range and precise control. The song builds and builds, leading to a massive climax at the end. The final lines, "My Love Won't Wait," required Elvis to hit a high G sharp, a note usually reserved for trained opera singers. They recorded several takes. Elvis was a perfectionist. He wasn't satisfied. He felt he wasn't quite getting the ending right. He wanted it to be perfect. On one of the final takes, take number 4, he went for it. He held the final note, full-throated and powerful. When he finished, the studio was silent for a moment. Then the musicians and the people in the control booth broke into applause. They knew they had just witnessed something special. Elvis had successfully transformed himself from a rock and roll singer into a world-class pop vocalist. He had taken the operatic influences he'd absorbed in Germany and made them his own. One small detail often gets overlooked. At the very end of the song, after the big note, Elvis can be heard saying something quietly. It sounds like he's saying, got it. It was his own quiet acknowledgement that he had finally nailed it. That was the take they used. The master was complete. In a few hours, in a Nashville studio, a group of talented musicians, led by a newly focused and ambitious singer, had created a record that would sell millions and define a new era of his career. Number 17, who were the unsung heroes on the record. While Elvis's name is on the single, the sound of It's Now or Never was created by a team of incredible musicians who rarely got the credit they deserved. These were the members of the Nashville A-Team, a core group of studio players who were responsible for the sound of hundreds of country and pop hits in the late 50s and 60s. They were known for their professionalism, their speed, and their creativity. When a star like Elvis came to town, this was the band they called. On guitar, you had the legendary Scotty Moore. Moore had been with Elvis from the very beginning at Sun Records in Memphis. His distinctive guitar licks were a fundamental part of Elvis's early sound. By 1960, his role had changed. He was no longer the lead instrumental voice. He was part of a larger ensemble, providing solid rhythm and texture. Alongside him was another brilliant guitarist, Hank Sugarfoot Garland. Garland was a jazz-influenced player of incredible skill. He could play any style, and his sophisticated playing added a layer of class to the Nashville sound. The rhythm section was the foundation. On drums were two of the best, DJ Fontana and Buddy Harman. Fontana was another original member of Elvis's band. Harman was a top Nashville session drummer. Using 2 drummers on a session was a common Nashville trick. It created a bigger, more powerful beat. The bass was held down by Bob Moore, no relation to Scotty. And Bob Moore was perhaps the most recorded bassist in history. His feel for the right bass line was unmatched. He knew exactly what a song needed, whether it was a simple root 5th country pattern or a more complex walking line. The most distinctive instrumental part on It's Now or Never is the piano played by Floyd Kramer. Kramer was a master of a style called slip note piano. Instead of just hitting a note, he would slide up to it from the note below, creating a unique crying sound. On It's Now or Never, he uses a more percussive, rhythmic style that drives the song forward. His playing gives the song its slightly exotic, almost tango-like feel. It was a brilliant creative choice that set the record apart from anything else on the radio. And then there were the backing vocals. The Jordanaires were a gospel quartet who had been singing with Elvis since 1956. Their smooth, tight harmonies were an essential part of his sound. On this track, they provided the gentle oohs and ahs that cushion Elvis's lead vocal. They also provided the powerful choral backing on the song's climax. Their leader, Gordon Stoker, often worked out the vocal arrangements on the spot with Elvis. This band of musicians was a well-oiled machine. They could walk into a studio, hear a song for the first time, and create a perfect arrangement in a matter of minutes. Their contribution to It's Now or Never was immense. They weren't just playing the notes, they were creating the sonic world in which Elvis's voice could shine. Number 16, How was a global hit? Made with 1960s technology. The recording of It's Now or Never at RCA Studio B in Nashville is a great example of how much could be achieved with the relatively simple technology of 1960. The studio itself was not a huge cavernous space. It was a simple rectangular room, about 42 feet by 27 feet. But its acoustics were legendary. The room had been designed by RCA engineers to have a very specific sound with controlled reverberation. This natural room sound was a key ingredient of the Nashville sound. The session was recorded on a 3-track tape machine. This seems primitive by today's standards, where sessions can have hundreds of tracks. But in 1960, 3 tracks was state-of-the-art for a commercial studio. It allowed the engineers to have some separation between the instruments. Typically, the rhythm section, bass, and drums would be recorded onto 1 track. The other instruments, like guitars and piano, would go on the 2nd track. Elvis's lead vocal would be recorded on the 3rd, central track. This gave the engineers some control when it came time to mix the song down to a mono single. They could adjust the balance between the band and the singer. The microphones they used were the best available at the time. Elvis likely sang into a Neumann U47, a classic German microphone famous for its warmth and clarity. It was the perfect mic to capture the power and nuance of his voice. The other instruments would have been mic'd with a variety of RCA and Neumann microphones, each chosen for its specific characteristics. The engineer for the session was a man named Bill Porter. Porter was a genius. He had a natural gift for microphone placement and for getting a balanced, clean sound on tape. He was a key architect of the Nashville sound. One of the most important pieces of technology at Studio B was its echo chamber. This was not a digital effect. It was a physical room in the basement of the studio, a concrete bunker with a speaker at one end and a microphone at the other. To add reverb to a vocal or an instrument, the engineer would send the signal from the tape machine to the speaker in the echo chamber. The microphone would pick up the sound as it bounced around the hard surfaces of the room. This wet signal would then be blended back in with the dry signal from the studio. This is what gives the recordings made at Studio B their characteristic shimmer and depth. Bill Porter was a master at using this echo chamber. He used it subtly on It's Now or Never to give Elvis's voice a sense of space and grandeur, especially on the big final note. The entire process from performance to tape was analog. It was a physical process. The sound waves were converted into electrical signals by the microphones, which were then imprinted as magnetic patterns onto a strip of tape. There was no undo button. If a musician made a mistake, the whole band had to play the song again. This is why the skill of the Nashville A-Team was so valuable. They rarely made mistakes. The final product was a testament to the skill of the musicians, the singer, the engineer, and the quality of the room and the equipment. Number 15. Why did RCA rush the song's release? After the recording session on April 3rd, 1960, the executives at RCA Records knew they had something special. It's Now or Never was not just another Elvis single. It was a statement. It was a mature, powerful performance that would appeal to a much broader audience than his rock and roll hits. It had the potential to be the biggest record of his career. But there was a problem. Elvis's first post-Army single, Stuck on You, was already a huge hit. It had shot to #1 on the Billboard charts. The standard industry practice was to let a hit single run its course before releasing a new one. You didn't want to compete with yourself, but the buzz around It's Now or Never was too strong to ignore. Elvis himself was incredibly proud of the record. He played it for everyone who would listen. His manager, Colonel Tom Parker, saw the huge commercial potential. He knew this song could redefine Elvis's image and make him a star for the adult audience, not just for teenagers. The pressure was on RCA to release it as soon as possible. They decided to break with standard practice. They would release It's Now or Never while Stuck on You was still high on the charts. This was a risky move. It could have split Elvis's sales and airplay, causing both songs to stall. RCA launched a major promotional campaign. They sent advance copies of the single to radio stations across the country. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Disc jockeys loved it. They recognized its massive crossover appeal. They started playing it on the air even before its official release date. This created a huge amount of public demand. People were going into record stores asking for a song they had heard on the radio but couldn't buy yet. The official release date in the United States was July 5th, 1960. The record was an instant smash. It entered the Billboard Hot 100 chart on July 18th. Just 4 weeks later, on August 15th, it was the #1 song in the country. It stayed at the top for 5 consecutive weeks. The gamble had paid off spectacularly. By rushing the release. RCA had capitalized on the incredible momentum Elvis had after returning from the Army. They had 2 massive #1 hits in the span of just a few months. It's Now or Never wasn't just a follow-up. It was an event. It confirmed that Elvis Presley was not a fading 50s star. He was the biggest and most important recording artist in the world, and he was just getting started on the next phase of his career. Number 14, Just How Fast Did the Record Sell? The sales figures for It's Now or Never are difficult to comprehend even by today's standards. They represent a level of commercial success that is almost impossible to achieve now in a fragmented media landscape. When the single was released in the US in July 1960, it sold over 500,000 copies in its first week. This was an incredible number. It was certified as a gold record by the RIAA almost immediately. But that was just the beginning. The song's 5-week run at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 drove sales through the roof. By the end of 1960, it had sold over 2 million copies in the United States alone. It was the best-selling single of the year. But the American success was only part of the story. The song was a global monster. In country after country, it didn't just top the charts, it obliterated sales records. The story in the United Kingdom was particularly dramatic. The demand for the record was so high before its release that RCA's British distributor Decca Records received over 250,000 pre-orders. When the single was finally released in late October 1960, it entered the UK charts at #1. This was an extremely rare achievement at the time. The song sold an astonishing 780,000 copies in its first week in the UK. This was a record that would stand for many years. It stayed at #1 in the UK for 8 weeks. In Germany, where Elvis had just finished his army service, the song was a cultural event. It sold over 1 million copies there. In Australia, it was #1 for 7 weeks. It was #1 in the Netherlands, Belgium, Norway, and many other countries. The global sales figures are staggering. Over its lifetime, It's Now or Never has sold more than 20 million copies worldwide. Some estimates put the number even higher, closer to 25 million. This makes it not only Elvis Presley's best-selling single, but one of the best-selling singles of all time by any artist. To put this in perspective, selling 20 million physical copies of a single is a monumental achievement. It means that in 1960 and the years that followed, millions of people around the world went to a record store, paid their money, and took home a small 7-inch vinyl disc with "It's Now or Never" on it. It was a tangible piece of culture. The song's commercial success wasn't just about numbers, it was a reflection of its incredible universal appeal. The combination of the classic melody, the passionate lyrics, and Elvis's powerhouse vocal performance connected with people on a massive scale, regardless of their country or language. It was the ultimate popular song, a record that everyone seemed to own. Number 13, What Caused the Chaos in the UK music scene. The release of It's Now or Never in the United Kingdom was a unique and chaotic event in the history of the British music industry. The song had already been a massive hit in the United States for several months. British fans had been hearing about it, and some had even heard the song on radio stations like Radio Luxembourg. The anticipation was enormous. RCA's UK distributor was flooded with advance orders. The problem was that the rights to the original melody, O Sol Mio, were in dispute in the UK. A different publishing company claimed ownership, and they had to sort out the legal issues before the record could be released. This delay only made the demand grow stronger. By the time the legal problems were resolved in late October 1960, the pre-orders for the single had reached 250,000 copies. This was an unprecedented number. The British pressing plants, the factories that manufactured the vinyl records, were not prepared for this level of demand. They simply could not make the records fast enough. They were running their machines 24 hours a day, but they couldn't keep up. Record stores were selling out of their initial shipments within hours. Because of this production bottleneck, RCA made a highly unusual decision. They decided to ship copies of the single from their American pressing plants to the UK. This was expensive and logistically complicated, but they had no other choice. So, for a time, British record buyers could find two different versions of the It's Now or Never single in stores, the British pressing and the American import. This created a kind of frenzy among fans and collectors. When the song was finally released, it entered the UK singles chart on October 28th, 1960 at number 1. This was a feat that had only been achieved once before in the history of the chart. The song's dominance was absolute. It stayed at the top spot for 8 weeks through Christmas and into the new year. It was the Christmas number 1 for 1960. Sales were so massive that it distorted the entire market. Other artists had to delay their single releases because they knew they couldn't compete. The total sales in the UK eventually surpassed 1 million copies, making it one of the first singles to achieve that milestone in British chart history. The story of the UK release shows just how big Elvis was in the early 1960s. He was not just an American phenomenon. He was a global force, and his records were not just songs, they were major cultural events that could overwhelm the infrastructure of a country's entire music industry. The chaos surrounding It's Now or Never in the UK was a clear sign that the world was in the grip of Elvis mania. Number 12. How did the song resonate in non-English speaking countries? Global impact of It's Now or Never went far beyond the English-speaking world. The song's success in countries across Europe, Asia, and Latin America was a powerful demonstration of music-speaking world. A key reason for this was the melody itself. O Sol Mio was already a well-known and beloved tune in many parts of the world, especially in countries with a strong connection to Italian culture. When people heard Elvis's version, they were hearing a familiar friend dressed in new, exciting clothes. In Germany, the song had a special significance. Elvis had just spent nearly 2 years there as a soldier. The German people felt a personal connection to him. They had seen him not as a distant superstar, but as a young man living in their country. When It's Now or Never was released, it was a massive event. It sold over 1 million copies in Germany, a phenomenal number for that market at the time. It became an anthem of the post-war generation, a symbol of American cool and modern romance. The song was a number 1 hit in the Netherlands for an incredible 12 weeks. In Belgium's Flanders region, it was number 1 for 11 weeks. In Norway, it topped the charts for 6 weeks. In almost every country in Western Europe, it was one of the biggest, if not the biggest, hit of the year. The pattern was the same everywhere. The powerful melody combined with Elvis's charismatic vocal performance and the driving rhythm created a sound that was irresistible. Even in countries where American pop music was less common, the song broke through. Local artists often recorded cover versions in their own languages. This helped to popularize the song even further. The theme of the song was universal. The idea of seizing the moment, of a love that cannot wait, is something that people everywhere can understand. You didn't need to understand every word of English to feel the emotion and the urgency in Elvis's voice. The record's success was also a product of RCA's growing international distribution network. By 1960, RCA was a global company with the ability to manufacture and market records in dozens of countries simultaneously. They could coordinate a global release in a way that would have been impossible just a few years earlier. It's Now or Never was one of the first truly global pop hits, a song that was heard and loved in cities from Tokyo to Rio de Janeiro, from Sydney to Stockholm. It helped to establish English as the international language of pop music, and it confirmed Elvis Presley's status not just as the king of rock and roll, but as the king of global pop. Number 11, did this one song actually change Elvis's career path? Yes, absolutely. It's Now or Never was more than just a hit single. It was a pivotal moment in Elvis Presley's career. It marked a deliberate and very successful transition from the rebellious rock and roller of the 1950s to a more mature, all-around entertainer of the 1960s. This was a change that was carefully planned by Elvis and his manager, Colonel Tom Parker. They knew that the teenage audience that had made him a star was growing up. To have a long-term career, Elvis needed to appeal to their parents as well. Before he went into the army, Elvis's biggest hits were songs like Hound Dog, Jailhouse Rock, and All Shook Up. They were raw, energetic, and driven by a heavy backbeat. They were the sound of teenage rebellion. It's Now or Never was something completely different. It was a grand, dramatic ballad. It showcased the power and range of his voice in a way his earlier records had not. It was sophisticated. It was a song that adults could appreciate. It could be played on mainstream radio stations that would never have touched Hound Dog. The success of the song opened up new doors for Elvis. It made him a star in the lucrative world of Las Vegas showrooms and television specials. It proved that he could handle big emotional songs, which led directly to other ballad hits like Are You Lonesome Tonight and Can't Help Falling in Love. This new direction also had a huge impact on his movie career. In the 1960s, Elvis's films became lighter, more family-friendly musical comedies. The soundtracks were filled with pop ballads and novelty songs, a far cry from the edgy rock and roll of Jailhouse Rock. Some of his original fans were disappointed by this change. They missed the raw energy of the young Elvis. They felt he had sold out, that he had abandoned the rock and roll that had made him great. There is some truth to this. The 1960s were a creatively uneven period for Elvis. He recorded a lot of mediocre movie soundtrack songs. But from a business perspective, the strategy was a brilliant success. Elvis remained one of the highest paid entertainers in the world throughout the decade. It's Now or Never was the song that made this transformation possible. It was the bridge between two different eras of his career. It showed the world that he was more than just a hip-swiveling rocker. He was a phenomenal vocalist who could sing any kind of music. It gave him the artistic and commercial credibility to become a mainstream superstar, an icon who was beloved by people of all ages. Without the massive global success of this one song, the second half of Elvis's career might have looked very different. Number 10, Who Got Rich from This Song? A song that sells 20 million copies generates a massive amount of money. The financial story of It's Now or Never is a complex web of royalties, publishing rights, and deals that made a number of people very wealthy. At the top of the chain, of course, was Elvis Presley. As the recording artist, he received a royalty on every single sold. In 1960, a top artist like Elvis might have had a royalty rate of around 5%. This sounds low by today's standards, but it was a different era. On a single that sold for, say, 98 cents, his royalty would have been about 5 cents per copy. Multiplied by 20 million, that's $1 million, a colossal sum of money in the early 1960s. And that's just From the initial sales, the song has continued to generate royalties from album sales, compilations, and radio play for decades. His manager, Colonel Tom Parker, also did very well. The Colonel famously took a 25% to 50% commission on all of Elvis's earnings. Whatever Elvis made from the song, the Colonel got a huge piece of it. RCA Records, the record label, made the most money in terms of gross revenue. They paid for the recording session, the manufacturing, the distribution, and the promotion. But after all those costs, the huge volume of sales meant that It's Now or Never was an incredibly profitable record for the company. And then there was the music publishing. This is where the real long-term money is often made in the music business. The publisher owns the copyright to the song itself, the words and the music. They collect royalties whenever the song is sold, played on the radio, or used in a movie. The publishing for It's Now or Never was handled by Hill and Range Music, a company co-owned by Julian and Gene Aberbach, with a stake held by Elvis and the Colonel. This was a standard part of the Colonel's business strategy. He insisted that Elvis get a piece of the publishing on most of the songs he recorded. This meant that every time It's Now or Never earned $1 in publishing royalties, a portion of that dollar went directly to Elvis. The songwriters Aaron Schroeder and Wally Gold also received a share of the publishing royalties. The standard deal for songwriters at the time was to split the royalties 50-50 with the publisher. So, on every dollar of publishing income, 50 cents went to Hill and Range and, by extension, Elvis, and the other 50 cents was split between Schroeder and Gold. For them, a song that they wrote in less than an hour became a lifelong source of income. It was like winning the lottery. The story of who got rich from It's Now or Never is a perfect illustration of the old music industry model. It was a machine designed to generate wealth for the artist, the manager, the record label, and the publisher. And for this particular song, the machine worked to perfection. Number 9, what did people think of the song in 1960? The critical reaction to It's Now or Never in 1960 was overwhelmingly positive, but it also reflected the cultural shift that the song represented. For the mainstream pop music critics and radio programmers, the song was a welcome development. They saw it as proof that Elvis Presley had matured. They praised his vocal performance, comparing him favorably to established crooners like Perry Como or even opera singers like Mario Lanza. A review in Billboard magazine, the leading music industry trade publication, called the song a powerful, dramatic performance and predicted it would be a blockbuster. They were right. This was a significant change from the way Elvis's music had been received just a few years earlier. In the mid-1950s, many critics had dismissed rock and roll as vulgar, noisy, and a corrupting influence on teenagers. Elvis was often the primary target of this criticism. They attacked his singing style, his stage presence, and the content of his songs. Now, with It's Now or Never, those same critics were hailing him as a true vocalist, a polished and professional entertainer. The song was seen as a sign that he had left his rebellious past behind him. For the younger audience, the rock and roll fans, the reaction was more mixed. Many of them loved the song. It was Elvis, after all, and it was a powerful romantic record. It was a perfect song for slow dancing at a school prom. But some of the more dedicated rock and roll purists were disappointed. They saw the song as a concession to the mainstream, a move away from the raw, exciting sound that had made them fall in love with Elvis in the first place. For them, It's Now or Never was too polished, too safe. It was the sound of Elvis becoming part of the establishment they were rebelling against. This division in the audience would define Elvis's career in the 1960s. He was now trying to be two things at once, a rock and roll icon for the young and a mainstream entertainer for their parents. It's Now or Never was the song that proved he could do both. It was so massively popular that it united these different audiences. You could hear it on a top 40 rock and roll station, and then you could hear it on an easy listening station that usually played Frank Sinatra. The song was so big that it transcended genres. It wasn't just a rock song or a pop song or a ballad. It was an Elvis song. And in 1960, that was the biggest thing you could be. Number 8, who dared to sing it after Elvis? Recording A cover version of a song as iconic and definitive as Elvis Presley's "It's Now or Never" is a daunting task for any artist. And Elvis's performance is so powerful and so closely associated with the song that it's almost impossible for anyone else to make it their own. However, that hasn't stopped many singers from trying over the years. The song's classic melody and timeless theme have made it an attractive choice for artists in a variety of genres. One of the most notable cover versions was by the legendary country singer and guitarist Chet Atkins. This is an interesting case because Atkins was the producer of Elvis's original recording session. In 1961, just a year after the original was released, Atkins recorded an instrumental version of the song for his album, Chet Atkins Workshop. His version replaces Elvis's vocal with his own clean, melodic Gretsch guitar playing. It's a beautiful, understated take on the song that highlights the strength of the melody itself. Another famous version was recorded by the British pop singer Petula Clark. She recorded a French-language version of the song called Tu es ma seule richesse, You Are My Only Wealth. This shows the song's international appeal and how it could be adapted for different cultures. In the world of classical music, the song has often been performed by tenors in a more traditional operatic style, bringing it back to its O Sol Mio roots. The famous three tenors, Pavarotti, Domingo, and Carreras, often included O Sol Mio in their concerts, and their performances always carried a hint of the pop energy that Elvis brought to the melody. More recently, the song has been covered by contemporary artists. The Australian vocal group The Ten Tenors recorded a powerful operatic pop version that pays tribute to Elvis's arrangement. The American singer Josh Groban, known for his classical crossover style, has also performed the song in his live shows. These modern versions often try to replicate the grandeur of Elvis's original using full orchestras and powerful vocal arrangements. However, no cover version of It's Now or Never has ever come close to matching the commercial or cultural impact of the original. Elvis's version is one of those rare recordings that is considered definitive. It's a perfect fusion of the right singer, the right song, and the right moment in time. While other artists can pay tribute to it, it's very difficult to improve upon, or even equal, the magic that was captured in that Nashville studio in April 1960. Number 7, how did a ballad influence rock vocalists? It might seem strange to think that a grand, operatic ballad like It's Now or Never could have an influence on rock and roll singers. After all, rock is supposed to be about raw energy, not polished vocal technique, but Elvis's performance on this record was a masterclass in vocal power and control, and it sent a clear message to other singers. A great rock vocalist needs to be able to do more than just shout. Before It's Now or Never, many rock and roll singers were limited in their vocal range and style. They were energetic and charismatic, but they weren't necessarily great technical singers. And Elvis's performance on this song raised the bar. He showed that it was possible to be a rock and roll star and still have a world-class voice. He demonstrated a 3-octave range, from a soft, gentle whisper to a full-throated opera-style high note. This inspired a generation of singers to work on their craft, to expand their range, and to think of themselves not just as frontmen, but as vocalists. You can hear the influence of Elvis's ballad singing on many of the great rock vocalists who came after him. Roy Orbison, for example, was another singer who combined rock and roll energy with an almost operatic vocal range and a flair for dramatic ballads. His songs like Crying and It's Over have the same kind of emotional intensity and vocal grandeur as It's Now or Never. Even British invasion bands were listening. Tom Jones, with his powerful, booming voice, clearly learned a lot from Elvis's ability to sell a big ballad. The influence can also be seen in the world of hard rock and heavy metal. Freddie Mercury of Queen was a huge Elvis fan. He had the same kind of vocal ambition, the desire to push his voice to its limits and to tackle complex, quasi-operatic material. A song like Bohemian Rhapsody is a direct descendant of the kind of musical drama that Elvis pioneered on records like It's Now or Never. Even a singer like Robert Plant of Led Zeppelin, known for his high-pitched blues wail, has spoken about his admiration for Elvis's early records and his vocal power. It's Now or Never taught rock singers that vulnerability and power could go hand in hand. It showed them that a ballad didn't have to be a weak or soft song. In the right hands, a ballad could be the most powerful and emotionally devastating song in a band's repertoire. It expanded the definition of what a rock and roll singer could be. It was a crucial step in the evolution of the rock vocalist from a simple shouter to a sophisticated and versatile musical artist. Number 6. Why was the B-side of the single so important? In the era of the 7-inch vinyl single, the B-side was an important piece of musical real estate. It was a chance for an artist to showcase a different side of their talent or to release a song that might not be a guaranteed commercial hit. The B-side of It's Now or Never was a song called A Mess of Blues, and it was a masterpiece. In many ways, it was the complete opposite of the A-side. While It's Now or Never was a polished, dramatic pop ballad, A Mess of Blues was a raw, gritty, mid-tempo blues shuffle. It was a reminder that, despite his new mature sound, Elvis had not forgotten his rock and roll and blues roots. A Mess of Blues was written by two legendary songwriters, Doc Pomus and Mort Schumann. They were a team who wrote many classic rock and roll songs, including Save the Last Dance for Me for the Drifters and Viva Las Vegas for Elvis. They were masters of crafting songs that were both musically interesting and lyrically clever. A Mess of Blues is a perfect example of their work. The song tells the story of a man who is completely lost since his woman left him. He's got a mess of blues. The lyrics are simple, direct, and full of great imagery. The song was recorded at the same Nashville session in March 1960 as some of Elvis's other post-Army material, just before the It's Now or Never session. The band is loose and swinging. The groove is infectious. Elvis's vocal is superb. He sounds relaxed, confident, and completely at home with the bluesy material. It's a performance that connects directly back to his early work at Sun Records. It has the same kind of authenticity and swagger. For the rock and roll fans who might have been worried that Elvis was going soft, A Mess of Blues was a reassurance. It proved that he could still rock with the best of them. The song was so good, in fact, that it became a minor hit in its own right. In the US, where the B-side of a single could also chart, A Mess of Blues reached number 32 on the Billboard Hot 100. In the UK, the B-side was often just as popular as the A-side. Many radio DJs would flip the record over and play both songs. The pairing of It's Now or Never and A Mess of Blues on a single record was a stroke of genius. It was a perfect snapshot of who Elvis Presley was as an artist in 1960. On one side, you had the sophisticated international pop star. On the other, you had the down-home blues singing rocker. The single showed his incredible versatility. It demonstrated that he was an artist who could not be confined to a single genre. He could sing anything. This one small piece of vinyl contained the two sides of Elvis's musical personality, and both were brilliant. Number 5. How does a 60-year-old song stay in the public eye? The life of a hit song doesn't end after it falls off the charts. If a song is powerful enough, it can embed itself in the culture and reappear for generations. It's Now or Never is one of those songs. It has remained a part of the popular soundscape for over 60 years, largely through its use in movies, television shows, and advertising. Its grand, romantic feel makes it a perfect soundtrack for a certain kind of emotional moment. The song has appeared in numerous films. One of its most memorable uses was in the 1991 romantic comedy Honeymoon in Vegas, starring Nicolas Cage and Sarah Jessica Parker. The film's plot involves a group of Elvis impersonators, and the soundtrack is filled with Elvis songs. It's Now or Never is used in a key scene, its dramatic sweep perfectly matching the over-the-top romantic comedy of the film. It has also been used in films to establish a specific time period, instantly transporting the audience back to the early 1960s. On television, the song has been used in everything from sitcoms to dramas. It might be played in the background of a scene in a diner, or a character might sing a few bars of it. It's a piece of musical shorthand. The producers know that the audience will instantly recognize the song and the feelings associated with it: romance, drama, and a touch of old-fashioned cool. Advertising has also played a huge role in keeping the song alive. The song's message of urgency, "It's now or never," is a perfect fit for a sales campaign. It has been used to sell everything from cars to vacation packages. A famous ad campaign for a brand of coffee used the song to suggest that this was the ultimate coffee experience, one you had to try right now. Each time the song is used in a commercial, it is introduced to a new generation of listeners who might not know it otherwise. The song's continued presence is also due to the enduring legacy of Elvis Presley himself. He remains one of the most famous and beloved figures in popular culture. His music is constantly being repackaged and released in new compilations and box sets. "It's Now or Never" is always included as one of his signature songs. It is a staple of oldies radio stations and streaming playlists. Through these various channels, the song has managed to achieve a kind of immortality. It's no longer just a hit from 1960, it's a standard, a piece of the 20th century cultural furniture, as recognizable and timeless as the classic Italian melody it was built upon. Number 4, did the original Italian writers ever see any money? The story of the copyright and royalties for "O Sole Mio," the original melody of "It's Now or Never," is a long and complicated legal saga. When Edoardo di Capua and Giovanni Capurro wrote the song in 1898, the world of music publishing was very different. They sold the rights to the Bideri publishing house in Naples for a small, one-time fee. The song became a massive international hit, but its creators saw very little of the fortune it generated. Di Capua, the composer, died in poverty in 1917. For many years, the song was treated as if it were in the public domain, like a traditional folk song. This meant that people could record it and use it without paying royalties to the original creators' estates. This is likely why Tony Martin was able to record his version, "There's No Tomorrow," in 1949 without any major legal issues. However, under international copyright law, the song was still technically protected. When Elvis's "It's Now or Never" became a global mega hit in 1960, the situation changed. The sheer amount of money involved was too large to ignore. The German publisher Schott Music claimed that it had acquired the rights to the song from the original Italian publisher Bideri. They began to demand a share of the massive royalties being generated by Elvis's record. This led to a series of legal battles that went on for years. The publishers of "It's Now or Never," Hill and Range, argued that the melody was in the public domain. The courts eventually had to get involved to sort out who owned what. The legal situation was particularly messy in the United Kingdom, which is why the release of Elvis's single was delayed there. A different publisher claimed the UK rights, and the dispute had to be settled before the record could be sold. In the end, legal settlements were reached. The estate of Edoardo di Capua, the composer, did eventually begin to receive some of the royalties they were owed, decades after his death. It was a case of justice delayed. The story highlights a common problem in the history of popular music, where the original creators of a song, particularly those from an earlier era, often do not benefit from its later success. In this case, the global smash hit by Elvis Presley in 1960 finally forced the music industry to recognize the legal rights of a poor Italian composer who had died more than 40 years earlier. It's a reminder that behind every great song, there is a business story, and sometimes that story is not a happy one for the people who wrote the music. Number 3, what does a 1960 hit look like in the streaming age? In the 21st century, the success of a song is no longer measured just by record sales. It's measured by clicks, streams, and downloads. So how does a song like "It's Now or Never," a product of the vinyl era, hold up in the digital world? The answer is surprisingly well. The song's status as a classic has helped it to find a new life on platforms like Spotify, Apple Music, and YouTube. On Spotify, one of the world's leading music streaming services, "It's Now or Never" has been streamed hundreds of millions of times. This is a huge number for a song recorded in 1960. It shows that people are still actively seeking it out and listening to it. It is consistently one of the most streamed songs in Elvis Presley's vast catalog. It is included on countless official and user-created playlists with titles like 60s Classics, All-Time Greatest Hits, or Romantic Ballads. This is how many younger listeners discover the song for the first time. On YouTube, the song is also incredibly popular. The official audio uploaded by Elvis's record label has tens of millions of views. In addition, there are hundreds of other videos featuring the song, live performance clips, fan-made lyric videos, and uploads of the original vinyl single. When you add up the views on all these different videos, the total number is enormous. YouTube has become a kind of digital archive, preserving and sharing this classic recording with a global audience. The song has also performed well in the world of digital downloads. When iTunes was the dominant form of music consumption, It's Now or Never was a consistent seller. In 2005, as part of a campaign to release all of Elvis's UK #1 singles, It's Now or Never was reissued as a CD single and a digital download. In a remarkable display of his enduring popularity, the single went to #1 on the UK charts for a second time 45 years after its original release. The digital legacy of It's Now or Never proves that a great song can transcend technology. The way we listen to music has changed dramatically since 1960, from vinyl records to streaming services on our phones. But the song itself remains as powerful as ever. The combination of a timeless melody and a legendary vocal performance continues to connect with listeners of all ages. In the digital age, it's easier than ever for someone to hear this classic for the first time, ensuring that the song's legacy will continue for many years to come. Number 2, how does this song compare to Elvis's other hits? Elvis Presley had 18 #1 hits in the United States on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. He had dozens more that reached the top 10. His catalog of hits is one of the most impressive in the history of popular music. So where does It's Now or Never fit in among all these other classic songs? In terms of commercial success, it stands at the very top. With worldwide sales of over 20 million copies, it is his best-selling single. No other Elvis song, not Hound Dog, not Jailhouse Rock, not Suspicious Minds, sold as many physical copies as It's Now or Never. In terms of its chart performance, it was also one of his most dominant hits. A 5-week run at #1 in the US and an 8-week run at #1 in the UK are incredible achievements. It was a true global chart topper, reaching the top spot in more countries than almost any of his other singles. Stylistically, the song holds a unique place in his body of work. It is his most successful and famous example of the operatic pop style he explored in the early 1960s. While he had other major ballad hits like Are You Lonesome Tonight and Can't Help Falling in Love, neither of them had the same kind of raw, quasi-operatic vocal power as It's Now or Never. That spectacular high note at the end sets it apart. It was a vocal performance that no other pop singer of his era could have matched. However, when people talk about the essential Elvis, they often point to his 1950s rock and roll recordings. Songs like Heartbreak Hotel or Don't Be Cruel are seen as more revolutionary. They were the songs that changed the course of popular music and created a new youth culture. It's Now or Never, for all its success, was less of a revolution and more of a perfection of an existing style. It was Elvis mastering the world of mainstream pop rather than inventing a new one. So its place is complex. If you measure by sales and global reach, It's Now or Never is arguably his single greatest hit. It was the song that made him a truly international superstar, beloved by all ages. If you measure by cultural impact and influence on the future of rock and roll, his earlier work might be seen as more important. But perhaps the best way to see it is as the ultimate proof of his artistic range. The same man who sang the raw, bluesy Hound Dog could also deliver the sophisticated, powerful vocal on It's Now or Never. No other artist in history has been able to bridge those two worlds so successfully. That, in itself, makes the song one of the most important and impressive achievements of his career. Number 1, why does A Simple Love Song from 1960 still matter? It's Now or Never matters because it is a perfect record. It's a rare moment in music history where every single element came together in exactly the right way. You have a melody that is a proven, time-tested classic. You have lyrics that are simple, direct, and universally understood. You have a brilliant arrangement played by some of the best studio musicians in the world. And you have a vocal performance for the ages, delivered by an artist at the absolute peak of his powers. The song matters because of what it represented in Elvis Presley's career. It was the sound of his triumphant return from the army. It was the moment he transformed from a teenage idol into a global superstar. It was the bridge between the raw energy of his past and the polished professionalism of his future. The song redefined what was possible for a pop vocalist, proving that a singer could have both rock and roll swagger and classical grace. And it matters because of its incredible global reach. This was one of the first songs to become a hit in dozens of countries simultaneously. It was a piece of shared global culture at a time when the world was becoming more connected. It broke down barriers of language and geography, proving that a great melody and a great voice could be understood and loved by anyone, anywhere. Its sales figures are not just numbers, they are a measure of the millions of individual human connections that were made with this one piece of music. And finally, it matters because it still sounds amazing today. More than 60 years after it was recorded, the song has lost none of its power. The production is clean and timeless, the musicianship is flawless, and Elvis's voice, full of passion, urgency, and incredible technical skill, is still capable of sending a shiver down your spine. The final, soaring note of My Love Won't Wait is one of the most thrilling moments in all of popular music. It is the sound of an artist reaching for something beyond the ordinary and for a brief, perfect moment achieving it. That is why, after all these years, we are still listening.